name's Mick Harrison. I'm an experiencer. I'm 59 years old. I grew up in a little country town called Longwarry in Gippsland, Victoria. I currently live in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. This story I'm going to tell you today is about how I had an encounter in a very isolated property up in Gippsland, in an area where I lived and worked, and it was an extremely life-changing experience that made my whole life just turn upside down. I did a big 180-degree turn in my life. So there's a bit of a lead up to this story. Approximately 27 years ago, before my son was born, I stayed in Melbourne overnight in a friend's place, and we we got up in the morning and we were driving home. I had to drive back because I was in the Country Fire Authority, and I had to do what they call a radio sked. And on the way home, I'm driving down a street in Melbourne with my wife at the time, and I look over to my left and I see this black UFO, and I'm right into aviation. I'm a private pilot, and I've been, flying on and off for years, although I haven't flown for years. And I'm very aware of, different aircraft, you name it, jets and propeller-driven aircraft, balloons, rockets, bombs or whatever. And this thing was phenomenal. The only way to describe it, it was a jet black craft, approximately, I'd say about a kilometre away, and it kind of looked like a stingray. It had like bits hanging down off the side of it, and that was the beginning of it. That was about 27 years ago, and I sort of, I thought, what's going on here? Well, that was a UFO. And the next day, I rang a fairly major newspaper here in Australia called the Herald Sun, and it was only known as the Sun at the time. And I rang them and asked if anyone had reported seeing a UFO, because I pulled over in a service station and got out of my car, and there's all these cars going up and down the road, and I'm looking at this thing and I'm thinking, can anyone else see this thing? And so I rang the newspaper and I just got a deathly silence, and I was pretty angry at the time. I thought, why treat me like that? But later on in my research, I found out why, which is neither here nor there. So leading up to this experience, I'm an arborist by trade. I left school at 17 and I started working for my father, and my father used to clear power lines for the State Electricity Commission. And we used to travel all over Gippsland, cutting trees away from power lines. We used to use travel towers, and I was sort of a man of the bush sort of thing. I was, always out and about in the countryside, and I worked in trees for years and years and years, and I become an arborist in 1995, and so I was, I'm well versed in trees, and this job, we had to go up and clear a gentleman's driveway up in the Streslicky Mountains, and I was like, my company was based in Druin, and we had to go up to a place called Yarragon South. So anyone from Australia will probably be aware of this place. And we'd been to this property several times beforehand, and there's neither here nor there. It was just another client, where I worked, and it was sort of a semi-isolated property. It was in amongst eucalypt plantations, and sort of, it was semi-remnant vegetation. So a lot of it was natural bush with eucalypts and dogwoods and wattle trees and things, and so it was sort of, just sort of a semi-isolated property. I had two guys that worked with me. One guy was working with me for years, and I'll call them Bill and Ben because that's not their real name, because I don't want to utilise their real name. Later on we may do, but I won't at the moment for their protection. And Ben was, he was my apprentice. He was an adult apprentice. And the other guy, Bill, he was with me for, he worked for me for about 21 years, and he come along on this day. Now, with Ben was a pretty switched on young bloke. You know, he was a good worker, very reliable, didn't drink. And we went into this property, and we'd worked there before, and you know, had no hassles. And anyway, while we were working there, Ben come up to me in the afternoon and he said, "Mick, there's something wrong, there's something wrong." I said, what's the matter, mate? He said, "Oh, down near the water tanks." He said, "I don't know, I've got this creepy feeling and I just don't feel right." And I kind of looked at him and I thought, that's weird, you know, and you know, he's probably just having a bad day. And I sort of never really thought any more of it. That was, you know, about as far as it kind of went. And I said to him, "Look, you know, come up here, Ben, and just work around us." And then I went down there and I'm, you know, looking around, wondering what was, you know, bothering him. And I, you know, and I thought maybe, I don't know, I just didn't have a clue. So I just shrugged it off and never worried about it. So about a week later, Ben left me. He went and worked for another job. So he completed his apprenticeship and he got a job actually in earth moving. So he got out of trees after all that time. And so a fortnight after that event, Tim and myself, Ben and Bill and myself went back to this property. So I'll just start the whole day, how it all come about. So I got up 6:30 in the morning. It was just a normal day, and you know, I had breakfast, jumped in my Toyota Land Cruiser and drive down to the shed that we have where we used to store all our tippers and chippers and travel towers and stump grinders and things. And I got to think about this, and I said to Bill, "Look, we'll go. We're going up to Yarragon South to, you know, do a job up there again." And he said, "Yeah, no worries." So I said to Bill, "I'll head off earlier, and I'll just see you up there." So I jumped in the Toyota and away I went, and it was probably I guess about a half-hour drive up to the place. I drove up there, and I got there around about 15 minutes earlier than Bill. And so I pulled up and I opened the gate and I drove into the property, and the owner wasn't there. The owner comes from Melbourne, although now he resides at the place. But he was a Melbourne resident, but he owned this property. And I pulled into the place and I pulled up the Toyota over to the side of the track so Tim could come. I'm just going to call him Tim. So Tim could come into the place, and I all of a sudden started to begin to get this feeling of being watched. So here I am, I'm beside my Toyota, and I started unpacking all my gear, you know, getting out the chainsaws and refueling them and sharpening them, waiting for Tim to come up. And this feeling of being watched was overwhelming, right? And it got to a point at one stage where I felt it was almost physical. It was bizarre, right? So here I am, and I'm going about my business, but I'm sort of looking around. I'm thinking, what is this? And in my mind, I'm looking around up in the trees for a wedge-tailed eagle or a hawk or a fox, and none of these things are going to attack you. But I just felt that I was being watched. And every now and then I'm looking around, but every now and then I'd sort of look to a certain point up on a bit of a rise, a bit of a hill. And when I'm talking about this bit of a hill, it was only maybe 50 or 100 meters, sort of, it wasn't looking miles away. And there was like all just trees and bush and shrubs and things, but there was this black thing that just I kept looking to. And then I go about my stuff and I look back, and I'd scan around, but just I kept getting drawn to this one spot. And then next minute I hear the truck coming up the hill, and here comes Tim. So anyway, he pulled around and I guided him through the gate, because we're pretty particular with our vehicles that we didn't scratch them and stuff. And I guided him through the gate, and he pulls up. And anyway, I said to Tim, okay, we're just going to go through here and do the gentleman's driveway, and we're going to do what we used to call a 1 in 5. So it's in 1 metre and up 5 metres, and we sort of cut like a square into the driveway type of thing, so they can get, you know, like furniture vans and tip trucks and stuff through there without, you know, knocking on low branches. So this feeling at that time had gone, and I thought nothing more of it. I thought, oh, just, you know, what's going on? I'm just having a bad day. So away we went, and I used to have a Rayco chipper. It was a 12-inch chipper, so you could get, you know, 12-inch round logs and
Sure.
feed them into the chipper, and it would just eat them. You know, it was amazing. It was the most powerful thing ever. It was brilliant, but extremely loud, right? And so we started off by at the top end of the driveway near the main road, and we worked into the house of this property, and it took us 3/4 of a day to do. And as we're working, it was around about 8:30, I think, when we started, and we worked through till 10 o'clock in the morning, you know, to have our smoko or our brew. And while we were working, Tim was doing the cutting, and I was feeding the hogger, and or the mulcher. And this feeling just every now and then would come back. And now my mulcher, hogger, chipper, it used to rev extremely loud. Like, it was, if you didn't have earmuffs on, you couldn't stand near the thing. Well, I couldn't. It's just mega loud, you know, like, you know, with the, you know, ding, 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 and a chip, chip, chip of the, you know, the thing feeding the logs in. And, but this feeling of being watched was still coming in and out while I was doing that. Now, I really questioned my sanity at this stage. I think, what is this? This is weird, you know. So we worked through at 10 o'clock. We had our smoko, and I just never mentioned this to Tim. I just thought, oh, well, you know, I'm just having a bad day or something's going on. So we worked from, say, 10:15, I think it was, through to 1 o'clock. And we had some lunch then. We had a half an hour break. And halfway along the track into this property, there was a big cleared area. It was like a little miniature football oval sort of thing. It was all nice and manicured grass, where all the wallabies and wombats and things, you know, had eaten all the grass, and potentially deer or whatever, because there's deer in the area. There was fallow deer. And anyway, I said to Tim, I'm just going to duck up to the house and go to the toilet. So I jumped in my Toyota and zipped up to the house, and I went to the toilet, and it's quite an interesting toilet. It was, I'll say, and please excuse me, but it was a loo with a view. You could, you know, it didn't have a door on it or whatever, but it was like a small room, and it had a little library in it. And I remember, you know, looking at this library of books, and it was all occult stuff. You know, it was how to cast spells, and there's books on the universe, there's books on Bigfoot, there's books on UFOs, and what else was there? Just all that type of thing. And I was just really curious. So I'm pulling books out and flicking through them, looking at the pictures and whatnot. And anyway, all of a sudden, I'm on there, and next thing I hear this bang. And to describe it, it sounded like someone had a big piece of wood and they belted it against a tin shed. You know, like they've, you know, whacked it with a, you know, like a baseball bat.
Sure.
And I thought, wow, that's strange. There must be someone here. And anyway, I got out of the toilet and I walked up towards the house, and I looked over in the direction of where I had seen this or heard this noise. And I'm looking around, and there's nothing there. There's no people, there's nothing there. And I think that's a bit weird. But, you know, being an arborist, I know that trees shed limbs. And over here in Australia, we have a phenomena in trees. It's called sudden limb drop or summer limb drop. And there's a species of trees here called a river redgum, Eucalyptus cameldulensis, and they're renowned for dropping huge big limbs. And nearly every year someone gets killed along what they call the Murray River. There's a huge river called the Murray River that has all these eucalyptus trees along it, and they drop limbs on caravans and tents and kill people. And anyway, I'm looking at the, you know, where this noise was, and there's a little, like a chook shed, and I'm looking at it thinking, oh, well, you know, maybe the tree just dropped a limb, thought no more of it. So I jump back to my Toyota, go back to Tim, and away we go, and we work through to around about 3:30. And we finished the job, and I said to Tim, all right, we'll go up and unload the mulch out of the tipper. So we drove up, and there's a specific spot where the owner wanted the, you know, the mulch dropped. And anyway, so we unhooked the chipper and we're dumping the mulch, and all of a sudden I hear in the distance, I hear this helicopter. And I'm right into aviation. I'm listening. I said, "Oh, that's the Dauphin. That'll be the police helicopter because it's got a very distinct noise. It's got a, I think they call it a Fenstrom rear rotor, and a very, very distinct noise." I'm looking there, and all of a sudden, yep, fair enough. I see this, you know, helicopter going through, and I didn't sort of think much of it, but I really looked at the, you know, the helicopter. It wasn't all that far away. I'm guessing it was only about 300-400 meters away, and later on in the story, this all has a bearing into the whole story. So we drove back to the front gate of this property, and Tim stopped and I stopped. I got out the chainsaw and cut them off, and we just threw them down the bank because it wasn't worth, you know, starting up the chipper again just for half a dozen small bushes. And Tim said to me, you know, "Do you want a hand to pack up, Mick?" And I said, no, she'll be right. It's all good. You get going, because it's going to take you a fair while to get down the hill, because it was a really, like, it was up in the Strzelecki Mountains, and it's a fairly narrow, windy road down to Yarragon to go home. So I walked out on the dirt road, and I guided Tim through the gateway, and I gave him a thumbs up, and I said, "I'll see you 7:30 at the shed tomorrow," and yeah, see you, and away he went. So now's when things really got scary. What happened after that point, I can only say it was life-changing. It made me do a 180-degree turn in life. It made me realise that we're lied to, and I'm a pretty easygoing sort of a guy, but I really detest being lied to. And after this event, I realised this whole world is based on a lot of deception and lies, and it changed my life, it changed my family's life, and but it brought me to this point here, and I'm very, very fortunate. And probably the biggest thing is it led me to Jesus. That's the biggest thing, and Jesus is my saviour. I can assure you. All right. So Tim left, and I walked back in, and I had to pack up all my gear on my Toyota. And on my Toyota, it had cupboards. So behind the cabin, there was a cupboard that opened round, another one lifted up, and on the far side, there's another one lifted up. And the front cupboard is only about 2 foot wide, and we used to store our fuel and oil and stuff in there. And then there's another cupboard behind that had all our chainsaws and block and tackles. And then on the far side was all our ropes. And during the day, when we'd been doing this clearing, we'd been using what we call a pole saw, which is a big extension saw that reaches up I think it's about 3 meters. And then when you hold it up, you can reach about 5 meters with it. And I walked around the back of the Toyota, and all of a sudden, this feeling of being watched came over me again, and it became extremely intense. And I remember walking around the back of my Toyota, and I picked up my chainsaws, and I walked back and I put them down on the ground so I could put one in at a time, because I grabbed 2 at once. And all of a sudden, I started to vibrate. And the only way to describe it, it started here at the back of my skull, and it went right down my back. Now, at the time, I didn't think of my spine, right? I don't know why, but this vibration, I used to describe it as about, this round about the size of a Coca-Cola tin, and it went right down my back, and it was like an intense vibration. It started off very, very, very gentle, but then it got more and more and more intense. And I remember sort of thinking, what is this? And I picked up my chainsaw and I put it in the cupboard. And then the vibration went further and further out. And the next minute, my whole body was vibrating. And the only way to describe it, here in Melbourne, we have a place called Luna Park, where it's a fun park where you can go there and go on roller coasters and rah. And there's a place there called the Haunted House, and part of it, when you walk through the place, you stand on the floor, and the floor vibrates. It's a really intense vibration, and it must be activated by pressure. And that is the only way I can describe how I felt throughout my body, like this intense vibration. And I remember saying to I don't know if I said it or thought it, what the frick is this? What is this? And I remember at one point holding my hands out in front of me and looking at them, expecting them to be doing this, but they weren't. They were just normal, but the vibration was just right through my body. And also, I also noticed that everything went surreally quiet. Like, the old story, you could hear a pin drop. Well, that's how it was. Where I was, there's birds and trees, and there's noise in the bush, but everything went surreally quiet. And I thought, what is this? And I'm looking around thinking, what is this? And I walked around to the back of my Toyota, and I looked down the track that's leading back into the house, which is, a kilometre down the track. And there's this little kid standing there with no top on. And I'm thinking, where'd this little kid come from? And I remember standing there looking, and I'm just staring. I honestly don't know how long this stare went for. I'm guessing 10, 15 seconds, trying to compute what I'm seeing. And all of a sudden, I realise what I'm seeing. And over your left shoulder, there's a picture of an extraterrestrial there. Yes. And that's basically what I was looking at. And I remember, I don't know whether I said it or thought it, frick me. And I'm looking at this thing, and mate, I worked, after I'd finished trees, I gave up trees, and I worked in the ambulance industry for 9.5 years, and we used to have a pain score. Pain being 0, no pain being 0, and 10 being the worst pain you could ever experience. The way to describe that is, quite obviously, 0 is no pain. 10 for a woman, I'd say childbirth. For a guy, if I got your arm right now, you got a chainsaw and cut your arm off, that's 10. So here I am looking at this little being, and like it was only, I'd guess, I reckon 3 feet tall, maybe a smidgen taller. It had a really big head. It wasn't grey. It was actually sort of a creamy white colour.
Mm-hmm.
Very skinny arms, skinny legs. I don't remember its hands. It's weird because I was looking at it, but I don't remember its hands and I don't remember its feet. But its eyes, oh mate, the eyes were so intense. They were jet black. They were almond shaped and sloping back like in that photo there. And the fear, from 0 to 10, my fear was 15. It was off the scale. You got no idea. So here I am looking at this thing and we were just eyeballing one another, and it was around about 25 metres away. So that's, say, 25 yards for American viewers. And we're just looking at one another. I've got my hand up on the side of the Toyota just looking, you know, and it's an intense thing, and like fight or flight come into my mind. And I remember at one point, I was really concentrating on my peripheral vision, listening, and there was no sound. It was bizarre. There was just no noise. And the fight or flight, mate, back then I was pretty buff and, you know, I didn't like fighting, but I thought, game on. It was just a natural reaction. And I'm looking at this thing and the fear was off the scale and I'm vibrating and I'm looking at this thing and I'm thinking, whoa, what is this? And then I don't know what it was. I really don't know what it was, but at a certain point, and I honestly don't know how long it was. I don't know whether it was a minute, 2 minutes, whatever. I calmed down and my fear dropped off. Because this thing just stood there looking at me. I don't remember seeing it blink or moving around. It was just standing on the side of the track looking at me, right? And I thought, look, I've got to pack up. I've got to, you know, pack my gear up. So I packed up, you know, all my gear. I'm putting it in the cupboards. And again, I don't know how long that took. I'll guess 6, 7 minutes, and that's a guess. I honestly, time sort of didn't really correlate. And just while I'm packing up, every now and then I just glance back and it's still just standing there watching me, right? It never advanced on me. It never walked sideways or backwards or anything like that. And I had a peak cap on and I looked up and there it was standing. I'm just standing there between the cupboards looking at it and it's looking at me. And I'm thinking, all right, I'm done now. I'm out of here. Please don't abduct me. Let me get out of here. And I remember, you know, reading about where UFOs are seen and cars stop and they won't start and the engine stops. And anyway, I remember stepping into my Toyota and I threw the clutch and I put it in neutral and I grabbed hold of the key and I turned the key and I distinctly remember saying, please start, please start, please start. And it started. And mate, to listen to a 6-cylinder diesel engine start was the most beautiful sound I've ever heard in my life. And I put it in gear and I shut the door and I drove out the gate. And I had this vision for a second of, you know, half a dozen of them walking down the road going, you ain't going anywhere. And there was nothing there, quite obviously, thankfully. And I drove off. I drove about, I reckon, 80 meters, 80 yards, and it all stopped. The vibration stopped. Just this weird feeling just vanished, just went away. Yes, everything come back to normal. And I remember I did then start to shake, realistically shaken, uncontrollably in the vehicle, you know, like I'm really shaken throughout my body where I could physically see myself shaking. I remember trying to get some sense of reality where I turned on the radio in the Toyota, you know, to listen to the radio. And from that point to the highway, which I'm not going to tell you exactly because it'll give away, but let's say it was 18 kilometres from that point to the highway, you know, to the main road down this hill off the Strzelecki Mountains. And I don't remember any of it. I do not remember driving down. It's weird. And I got to the highway and I thought, who do I tell? Who the hell do I tell? And I was questioning myself in my brain. And at one point I thought about going to the police. And then I thought, oh, no, that probably wouldn't be a good idea. They'd probably, lock me up and send me to a psych ward or something. And I knew what I'd seen. It was real, I'll tell you here and now. And I drove home and I got home, and for, I'd say about 2 weeks, I tried to live a normal life without telling anyone. These things that ran through my mind, trying to question everything, and like, one of them was exactly that. How could it be totally quiet? How? There's no way. Like, you can't just turn sound off. No way, unless you suddenly go deaf yourself or something. There was that. There was the vibration. I knew I felt that. There was standing there looking at what I was looking at, which at first I thought was a little child, and it wasn't a little child. It was an extraterrestrial, a little grey. I'll put my hands up to that. There was driving 80 metres up the road, and all of a sudden everything coming back to normal, like hearing things properly, and the feeling going away. And then I had to, quite obviously have a hire car and a motel room. And anyway, we skimped and scraped and we booked our tickets, and I found a motel, booked a motel room. And this motel room, it was a bit of a life-changing event happened in there on 2 nights, the Friday night and the Saturday night, but I'll get to that. And then I had to quite obviously pay the money to go to this seminar. This is the first time I'd ever been to a UFO meeting of any sort of thing. And this seminar was on UFOs, alien abduction. There's other subjects, but I can't remember what they were. And I honestly, I'm going to say this, I half expected to walk in and see people with T-shirts on with, ET phone home, and people with hats on with antennas. I had no idea what I was going to see, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I got myself in for? Hopefully these people are normal people. And, what's really interesting, I walked into the place and I was probably, about the 15th odd person to get in, and I'm looking around and everyone was just normal. So I'm sitting back, and started her seminar, and I'll tell you here and now, I went through mixed emotions. You got no idea. Like, I'm seeing pictures of what I'd seen on the day, and she's talking about it as if it's, people looking at elephants in Africa or something. It's no big deal. There was times where I actually had to close my eyes or look away, and sometimes just block my ears. I couldn't bear to look at what she was talking about. It just freaked me out beyond belief. I was just, wow. And some of the things she was saying about what had happened to people and this and that, like, it was, with her, it was more on the good side. And I don't think there is such a thing as the good side with alien abduction or, contacting these beings, because, I'm a person that looks on both sides of the fence, if you know what I mean. I don't just take everything as gospel. I'll just look at everything, and I'll look at this and I'll look at that, and I'll decide. And mate, you've got no idea. And I dare say anyone that's listening who has ever gone through this experience, it's just, oh man, it was just so, it was life-changing, So I jump in my car and I drive back to the motel. And anyway, I got into bed and I can, drift off to sleep pretty quick. And sure enough, I went to sleep. And all of a sudden, so I'm dead to the world. All of a sudden I wake up as if I haven't been asleep. And I think it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. All of a sudden I just woke up as if I hadn't been asleep. And in the room, I hear all this sort of, like if you imagine getting paper and all these little footsteps. And I'm looking around, and in the room, like in the unit that I was in, the motel room, it's fairly big. And I'm looking around, and like it was just light enough to see. Like it wasn't pitch black, but it was light enough to see because there's ambient light coming in through the windows and stuff. And the only way to describe it, it was like, it sounded like little tiny people or little kids running around the room, and I hear this and paper shuffling. And I'm looking around and bang, straight back into fight or flight. And I sat up on my bed, I clenched my fists and I'm looking around. And again, back then I was, buff and strong. And again, I thought game on. And I'm looking around, but there was nothing in the room. And in the end, I just jumped up and I'm running throughout the motel room and I'm looking behind doors and what is this? And it went on, I reckon it went on for a minute. And all of a sudden it just stopped, right? I can assure you again, the fear was off the scale. Like you got no idea. I thought, what is this? And I remember walking into the bathroom and turning on the light and walking up to the mirror and doing this. Have I lost the plot? What is this? What is this? I got back into bed. It's, by this time, I guess, 3:15 in the morning. And I laid there for about an hour, tossing and turning, and I'm going over it. I'd get up, I'd look out the window and think, what was that? What's going on? I honestly thought I was losing the plot. And then we finally sat down to have this meeting, and for me to tell what I just told you, but I went into way more detail than what I've told you. I went from A to B with everything I did, and it's way more detail. And at the very end there, she said, "Is there anything you want to ask?" And I said, I'll be honest, I started crying at the time. I remember she put her hand out and she held my hand and she said, "Okay, Mick, just tell us what you want to ask." And I said, "If this is all real, and I know it is, and I know what I experienced, and I know what I heard, seen, felt, how do I protect my wife and my children?" Because I, had my wife and my 3 kids at the time. And she said, "Have you ever been harmed by anything that you recall?" And I had no recall of anything other than the one event that I've just told you guys. And she said, "More than likely you've been abducted since you were a small child." Now, I'm only going by what she was saying at the time. And she said, "If you have no recall of being harmed, then why would they start now?" And at the time, I thought, well, yeah, they probably wouldn't harm me, because I have no recall of being harmed. But I must admit, I've found out a lot of stuff since, which I won't go into. And this was the defining point in my life. This was what led me, I guess, to Jesus, because at the time, I believe there was a creator, but I wasn't religious in any way, shape or form. I believed, that there's, you know, a God as such. And she was holding my hand, I was crying, and she said, Mick, if these things come into your room and start doing anything and you just don't want to be a part of it, or you don't want them there, she said, just use these words. And she said, and this is what she said, and I'll just repeat what she said. She said, just say out loud, in the name of Jesus Christ, if you are not here for my greater good, go and go now. And, you know, Joe, there's certain things in my life that really stick in your brain, and that's one of them. What she just said, and I thought, okay. And you know, again, I'm not at the time I wasn't a religious guy. I just, you know, but I thought I'll just keep that in mind. And you know, I can remember my pre-takeoff checks when I was 16. You know, flying aeroplanes and temp fish and you know, trim neutral throttle 1,000, master on max, both, you know, or things, certain things that you have to remember in life. And anyone that's watching this, the words I just said, please remember them. I've never heard her say it to anyone else, ever. And we were pretty close to this lady after the event, you know. And it often makes me wonder sometimes where sometimes people, you know, maybe just have to tell the truth. They have to say the truth. And because she never ever says it in any of her lectures. Like, she stands out there and never says that, but she said that to me because she knew I was really upset, and I was, mate. It was life-changing what happened to me on that day. But this is where I found out that it worked. Okay, this is where I found out where it works, and I'll just move on from this point. Sure. So where were we? So Saturday afternoon, the event I think finished at 4 o'clock. And we all said our goodbyes, and I went back to the hotel, motel, whatever I was staying in. And I'd, you know, bought a few books, and I'd been highly recommended to research. Talk to as many people as you can, join UFO groups, you know, buy books, talk to people, watch YouTube clips and, you know, videos. And so I went back to the unit, and I had tea, went to bed, and I went to sleep. So this is Saturday night, and I'm in bed asleep, and again, all of a sudden, I wake up, and again in the room is this, and at one point there's where was I? So I'm laying in bed, and to my left there was the hallway, and this hallway would have been 50 or 60 meters long. It was a really big motel, and I don't know if you know what's the guy's name? Usain Bolt. He's the fastest man on earth, you know, Olympic or Commonwealth runner. And I hear this down the hallway, and really loud, super impossible, absolutely impossible fast running. And in the room is all this, you know, little sort of footsteps and paper shuffling again. And I'm there, and again, boom, fight or flight. And I'm looking around. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, just thank you, God. What Anne said to me just clicked into my mind, and I said out loud, in the name of Jesus Christ, if you are not here for my greater good, go, and go now. And it stopped. Instantly. It wasn't 5 seconds later or 10 seconds later. It was instantaneous. Everything stopped. As in the running and the paper shuffling and you know, the noises. I thought, wow. Okay, and I got out of bed and I'm still in the fight or flight mode, you know, and I'm walking around, you know, just like the night before. I looked out the window and I got back and I sat on the edge of my bed and I'm thinking, wow, that worked. That worked. And yeah, and from that day on, I just realised that Jesus, when you use his name, he's got the greatest power in the world, on everywhere. And it was life-changing for me at that time, mate. It was life-changing. And I remember I got up the next morning, I just sat there, I had breakfast, and I just sat there contemplating, thinking it over and over, what I experienced, what I said, and how instantaneously it stopped. Just bang, and it stopped as soon as I said the words. And I thought, wow. And so, in a way, from that point, it set something ticking over in my mind. And I jumped on the plane, went at the airport, jumped on the plane, flew back to Melbourne, and I'll never forget, I was walking through the airport and I'm looking at, you know, air hostesses and cleaners and tourists, you know, and they're all got their bags and they're all got their, you know, shorts on and their hats, and they're all off on holidays or coming back from holidays. And it was really, really surreal. I remember at one point actually looking at a lady wheeling a pram with a baby in it. And I thought, if only you people know what I know now. It's really interesting. On the way, I got to a place called Pakenham, and there was a massive thunderstorm just slightly to the north, and behind us from the west, the sun was shining. And you imagine this thunderstorm, and it was black and it's pouring, there's lightning, but slightly to the south as I'm driving east, it was clear, and the sun was low and it was super bright. And this rainbow went up and over, and the rainbow come down on exactly the point where I had my encounter. And I went home and I remember Anne told me that I have to tell my children because she said they'll be a part of this. And so I went home and I told my ex, I said, look, you know, I told her what happened. And I said, we've got to tell the kids. And she said, no way. And I said, no, I've got to, because they'll be a part of it. And she said, no, you're not doing that. And me and her didn't fight very often, but we had a massive argument. And because I had to tell the kids. And so I got my kids by themselves one day and I told them what happened. And then from that point, they told me a few little things that they'd sort of seen and whatnot and hadn't really told me. And from that point, my two boys and my daughter all experienced stuff, right? And my daughter saw a UFO one night with her boyfriend up near a place called Healesville. My son saw another one. And my middle son, I can't remember what he'd seen, but all of them experienced stuff, right? And at the time I said to them, well, you know, don't be scared, you know, because it was all, I sort of got into this new age stuff, you know, it's all love and light and they're all here for humanity and rah, 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 rah. And I've since found out I was extremely, extremely misled and wrong. I've told this story, I guess, I don't know, 80, 100 times, you know, probably 200 times, I don't know. And, but I've always told them about, you know, when I use the Jesus Christ part of it, using his name. And I don't know whether anyone has, you know, come away from that, you know, taken that on board or not. But for me, it worked 100%. There's no ifs or buts. It just worked. And so from that point, I become a researcher. I went to lots of seminars. I went to Adelaide and met Charles Hall. And Charles Hall has had experiences in Area 53, I think it is. It's not 51. He was a weather forecaster who had experiences with tall whites. I remember me and him, he seemed a very religious man, and I remember me and him talked about fear. And at the end of the seminar, me and him had a one-on-one for about 10 minutes just talking about how to overcome fear. And he used Jesus Christ also. It's very interesting. And again, those things just plugged into my mind. And